stiff and so rigid for the last 18 months. I had so many of my friends and my colleagues who really know me. They said, Gresham, loosen up a little bit, you know, take a little funnier side. And it really kind of broke through. I mean, when we put up the very first thing, it said political campaign headquarters or boot camp. I mean, it was kind of a spoof. But listen, I'm very proud of my military record. It certainly didn't mean to be a military endorsement. It was just kind of a fun way to present who I am and what I am and kind of what I'm all about.
Let's delve into the budget. There is a menacing billion-dollar budget shortfall expected next year. The state budget will have to replace millions in one-time federal stimulus money, as you both know, that lawmakers really had to use to kind of cobble together this year's budget. Agencies that serve the poor and our schools have already taken huge cuts. The question, and we'll go first to Ms. Haley, what will you do to generate revenue quickly?
You know, it's not about generating revenue, and it's not about what you spend, it's how you spend. We are now going into a mode of a tough budget time. As an accountant, I can tell you we have got to stretch dollars. We've got to make sure that we see this as the opportunity it is. First thing I'm going to do is audit all of my agencies, go back and start at zero and say, what do we have to have, and work our way up. I'm going to propose a budget to the General Assembly that will help them make those hard decisions so that we're not just handling this year, but we're thinking about year 3 and 5 and 7 and where we want to go as a state. It is time for us to look at state government as a business plan and understand that everything we do in the budget affects everything else, and we've got to start making good decisions. We saw government grow by $1 billion a year, and we have nothing to show for it. This is a great opportunity to learn lessons, to prioritize spending, and to make sure we're covering our core services and not turning around and hurting the things that we don't need to have there.
So just to be clear for voters, despite the current budget crisis, you don't believe there's any need to generate new revenue right now?
I think what we need to do is clean up how we're spending. We saw that yesterday. We had the most vetoes sustained in history yesterday. When we spent 20 hours on the House floor, 51 out of 107 vetoes were sustained. It was incredible. And what that showed was the legislature's willingness to understand the value of a dollar and the willingness to understand you can't keep spending the way we always have. This is time to make the tough decisions. That's what we're going to start to do.
Thank you.
Congressman Barrett, same question. You heard your opponent say that generating revenue was not as important as other things. How do you tackle that issue?
Well, I think there's a couple things. I mean, we've got to get back to the basics. We have to understand what government's responsibility is. I think there's 4 core issues. Number 1, to keep its citizens safe and secure with law enforcement, with the judicial system, with the prison system, with our infrastructure. Not only is that safety, but that's economic development. Also, education and Medicaid. Those are two mandates that we have to have. But once we cut that down, once we focus on those core issues, it is important to grow the economy. It is important to grow jobs. I would do 3 things from the outset. Number 1 is total tax reform, comprehensive tax reform, a system that's fair, that's flatter, that helps businesses that are here and businesses coming into South Carolina. Number 2, focus on the Department of Commerce, having a first-run, first-class, well-funded Department of Commerce and a governor that's going to roll up his sleeves and bring jobs and economic growth. And third, we've got 30,000 to 40,000 jobs in South Carolina that are unfilled because we don't have the skilled workers. Let's make sure that we've got those skilled workers, hire them on the job training, so it's a benefit for the unemployed worker and the manufacturer at the same time.
Governor Sanford says that the next budget writers for the not this fiscal year, but the next one, will be forced to choose between savagely cutting state agencies' budgets and thereby hurting the least of these served by government, or materially raising taxes on all South Carolinians. Given that choice, which one would you choose?
Well, I've taken a no new taxes pledge, and when we talk about comprehensive tax reform, we've got to come up with a system that is a more stable system and putting all of the options on the table. We've also got to go back and look at those core issues. What is government's main responsibility? You know, in good times, we've always said everything's a priority, and when everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority. We've got to set those priorities, and we've got to look at how we spend. We've got to have zero-based budgeting. We've got to have an accounting, a total up and down look at our agencies to make sure that we're not duplicating our services and that those dollars go to exactly where we want them to go.
We have an email question from Lee DeSantis in Columbia, and Representative Haley, this is for you. It says, many have said if you are elected, we will have another 4 years of Mark Sanford and another toxic legislative executive relationship with more State House gridlock. If elected governor, Please differentiate your approach when working with our legislative body versus that approach of Governor Sanford's.
And you know, we're very different people. Just like you have two children that are different, you know, people are different in terms of their personalities. This is what I can tell you. First of all, I've been in the legislature long enough to know what the problems are, but I haven't been in the legislature long enough to be part of the fraternity party. The key to leading in the legislature and the key to being governor is to, one, put forward a plan that can tell them where we want to go as a state and educate the people and educate the legislature on how we're going to get there. The second thing is being predictable, telling them what we're going to do before we do it, giving the consequences before they happen. The goal that I want to have is the first year in office to give South Carolina a win. I want the legislature to feel what it's like to really win for the people of the state, and I want the people to feel what it's like when they return and have the power of the government again. This can be done, but it takes a governor that can turn around and show an agenda of where we need to go, how we need to get there, with a plan of looking at year 3 and 5 and 7. I think the people are going to be pleasantly surprised.
You say you're not part of that fraternity, but in order to get anything done, don't you have to drink from their keg, so to speak, a little bit in order to...
You know, you actually don't have to, Ben. I mean, I think the important thing is, look, I was chairman of the freshman class. I was majority whip. I was put on a powerful business committee and subcommittee chair. I can get along with the legislature and I can lead. But when I saw something wrong, when I saw that votes were being passed by a voice vote, and I would be embarrassed if you saw what I saw, I sat there and fought and said, we've got to start voting on the record. We differed on that. The legislature opposed me for 2.5 years on that, but I knew that until we got a good government, we couldn't get a working government. My goal is to get things done. I got and worked on workers' comp reform with the legislature, coastal insurance reform, tort reform. We'll continue to work on other issues, but when they are wrong, my goal is to side with the people of the state, not with the legislature. My goal is to educate and make sure that people know what we're doing, why we're doing it. I will make sure I go into every one of those districts where they vote for good government, pro-business reforms, and praise them for it. But I will also go into those districts when they vote against good government, pro-business reforms, and hold those legislators' hands to the fire. I think I owe that to the people of the state.
Let me ask you a quick question before we get into a brief follow-up before we get into the next question. And Congressman Barrett mentioned that he is